Well, the area I live in, down in South Florida, was recently visited by a little storm. So I'm a little behind this week with reviews, so I picked a shorter, goofier film selection to review this week. One that didn't require a lot of deep analysis, but was just a short, fun movie. The Black Raven from 1943 was a fun, spooky murder mystery film starring George Zucco. He's one of those creepy old actors I really enjoy watching in these old films. He's been in a bunch of the Universal monster movies, and the story here is that he runs this inn out in the middle of nowhere where he apparently smuggles people into Canada. And he's there with actor Glenn Strange, who he also acted with in the film The Mad Monster in 1942, another film I reviewed not long ago. Well, a bunch of colorful people will show up, and there's mayhem, and there's mystery, and there's murder. I'll give a summary of the film and then offer some closing thoughts.
This phone's dead. It's all right a minute ago.
You probably noticed there's a bad storm going on. Anything could happen.
Well, following the opening credits, we find that it's a dark and stormy night at the Black Raven Inn. And in fact, it seems to rain nonstop through this film. And we see our friend George Zucco. He is there as the character Amos Bradford. Now, Andy arrives. He's played by actor Glenn Strange, who usually plays the giant, beefy characters in old films like this, and he works here with Amos. Interestingly, he's still wearing the coveralls just like in the movie The Mad Monster. Well, Amos tells him to lock up the place for the night. Now, Amos is warming himself by the fire when the character Whitey shows up, played by I. Stanford Jolly. Now, he's kind of this sketchy-looking character, and he has a gun, and we find out that he has just broken out of prison, and that the two of them used to work together in crime, but Amos had ripped him off, and he's wanting payback. Now, when Andy happens to arrive back in, that's enough of a distraction that Amos can get the jump on him, get the gun from him, and Andy can grab him. They tie him up, and Amos plans to turn him back into the police again. Well, around this time, someone else shows up, rings the bell at the inn, and says, "I've heard you can help slip a guy across the Canadian border." And it's here that we find out that Amos is actually the Black Raven, who apparently secretly helps people make a move into Canada. And his inn is also called the Black Raven. So there's a little confusion there, but whatever. This guy shows up. He's kind of like this mobster-looking character, and he shows him a newspaper showing that he, Mike Bardoni, played by actor Noel Madison, is the one who actually needs to get into Canada. He's this big-time criminal, and he's in trouble, and he needs to leave, and he needs to leave soon. Well, we cut over to the character Horace Weatherby, who's played by actor Brian Folger of Petticoat Junction, one of my favorite old shows. I need to do a review of that program someday. I also caught him recently in the film They Live by Night with Farley Granger. Anyhow, he's in his car, it's raining crazy, and he's desperate to get across a flooded road, and speaking from recent experience, it's best to listen to the guy that says, "Don't try to cross the flooded road." Well, he's told that the bridge has been washed out, but he can go and stay at the Black Raven, which he does. And another car happens to come along around the same time, and in it is a couple. They're on their way to try to elope in Canada. Wanda McKay plays Lee Winfield, and Robert Livingston plays Alan Bentley. So they're the sweet romantic love interest of this film, and they too make their way to the Black Raven. Anyhow, Horace makes it to the Black Raven and asks for a room. Amos and Mike are suspicious of him and discover that he's carrying a lot of money with him. Apparently, he's trying to escape to Canada as well. Alan and Lee arrive and they get their separate rooms. And meanwhile, it continues to rain nonstop outside. Well, the character Tim Winfield arrives, played by actor Robert Middlemass. Now, this is Lee's dad, who is out looking for his daughter, I guess, and apparently his car has broken down in a ditch nearby, and he just happened to make his way to the exact same inn that they are staying at. What are the odds? Amos, however, discovers that Whitey has escaped by climbing out a window, and he orders Andy to go and look for him. Tim discovers Alan and tells him off for trying to flee to marry his daughter, and nails him with a really convincing slap, too.
I warned you to stay away from my daughter, and you brought her here.
That's right. And as soon as we reach Canada, we're going to be married.
You'll never get to Canada.
Look here, Mr. Winfield. Lee and I love each other. Not even you can stop us. I could kill you for that.
A lot of people have felt that same way about me. But I'm still very much alive.
I hope for Lee's sake that you and I might someday be reconciled. But I won't take that, not even from her father.
You'll take more than that. I haven't even started on you.
And Tim also confronts his daughter, who is angry at her father and has had enough, calling him out as a corrupt politician. But Tim wants her to leave Alan and come back home again. Horace, meanwhile, is in his room, going through his money, and suddenly freaks out and runs. He thinks that someone is trying to break into his room. But Tim recognizes Horace as this banker who had recently got away with some stolen money, which Horace, of course, denies. But as Tim talks to him, he convinces him to give over the money so that he can take it back, or he'll have to stand trial for embezzlement or something like that. So Horace agrees and gives the money to Tim. Now, meanwhile, Andy goes creeping around the house during the storm looking for Whitey. And there's some silliness as he gets jumpy from a window that pops open and a box that he's unaware that he's dragging behind him. You know, goofy stuff like that. Both Glenn Strange and Byron Folger, I think, were mostly in this film for comedic effect. But it works. I thought they were funny. Andy manages to find a dead body and notifies Amos and Alan. And they discover it's the character Tim, who had been struck on the head. Lee arrives and breaks down sobbing, and Horace shows up as well and looks surprised. So halfway into the film, it's now finally become a murder mystery. And just a note, this film is literally just an hour long, so it's not a huge time investment if you want to check it out. And it's in the public domain, as best I can tell, so you can find copies of it all over the place. Well, the character, Mike Bardoni, you know, the crime boss guy, he corners Amos at gunpoint and asks for the money, which he doesn't have. No one seems to know where it is. Andy, meanwhile, sees a shadowy figure in the cellar and runs to get the others. Now, at this point, the sheriff arrives. He's played by actor Charles Middleton. He played Ming the Merciless back in the 1930s, and he had been called by somebody at the house. He arrives, he's asking questions, finds out about the murder, and he sees the body, starts taking his notes, and he seems mighty suspicious of the character Alan, as he had the most clear alibi, and he's ready to take him away, but he wants to look around the house a little bit first. Now, Andy is looking around, and there's a goofy scene as Horace accidentally sneaks up behind him to see what he's up to.
I beg your pardon. What's the idea of pushing me down the stairs?
Well, Horace wants to leave the house, but Andy won't let him. The sheriff continues to question Alan, and suddenly Lee distracts the sheriff, so Alan can make a break for it. When the sheriff tries to run, he's tripped by Amos, and Andy hides out, and Amos continues his investigation around the house, and carefully studies a stool. Okay. Outside, the sheriff sees a mysterious man running. It's the character Whitey. He tries to shoot him and ends up grappling with him and gets clubbed by Whitey, who grabs the gun and heads back into the house. Well, the crime lord Mike, he wants his money, and he orders Andy and Horace into the basement at gunpoint, and both go tumbling down the stairs again. And while Whitey continues to creep into the house, Mike ties up Amos and Lee and looks for the money. Andy and Horace continue their comedic antics in the basement. The sheriff revives and visits the basement and finds them, and Alan, and takes him away at gunpoint. You know, there's just so much going on here. I'm trying to do my best to summarize the film, but we're getting close to the end, and with only a few minutes left, I'm going to wrap up the review here. Will the sheriff find the real killer? Will they find the missing money? What is George Zucco up to? Will the young couple escape to get married? Well, you got to watch the film for yourself to see the ending. No spoilers, but, you know, it's, like I said, a brief movie. It's online for free. So let me wrap up with some quick closing thoughts. The Black Raven was produced by PRC, Producers Releasing Corporation, in 1943, and was directed by Sam Newfield. Best I can tell, this is in the public domain, as there are several rocky copies online. I really wasn't able to find a very clean version to work with, but well, it's just a review, so I do what I can. I thought it was a fun murder mystery with lots and lots of rain. And, it seemed a little muddled at first, as all of these various characters just happen to show up at this remote inn at the same time. But once they arrive and things get rolling with the story, I thought it was good. It was a lot of fun. And I'm a fan of George Zucco. I've seen him in a bunch of old monster films. He's always kind of this crazy guy trying to revive the Mummy Carice or something like that. I was reading through a book, Horror Film Stars, written by Michael Pitts, and there's a quote in a section of the book about George Zucco that during the 1940s, he was not happy with how he was always being cast as, just creepy characters. And he complained, quote, "I'm always being cast as a bloodletting, law-breaking, evil old man." But in my opinion, that's what he did best. And as mentioned, Glenn Strange has been in a bunch of other films I've seen as well. Generally monster films. He does a little more physical comedy here, and I like that. I don't think I've seen this slapstick, antic side of him before, and I thought it was really funny. This is the first film I've seen with Wanda McKay, and I thought she was fine here. She's a lovely actress, but not the most dynamic performance. I see that she's in some other films I have on my list, including Bowery at Midnight with Bela Lugosi. I hope to get to that, along with countless other films on my list. Anyhow, that's The Black Raven from 1943. It's an enjoyable old murder mystery film with lots of rain, and it's worth checking out. And just for kicks, here's some storm footage, courtesy of Ian. Enjoy.